Today we're going to talk about perplexing percentage problems. A percent is a ratio whose second term is 100. Percent means parts of a whole. We want to know what parts of that whole is each percent. So if we talk about a particular number, like 84, we want to know the different percents. So if 84 is our whole, then that's 100%, right? If 84 is our whole, what is 0% of that? Well, 0% of 84 is 0, right? So then we can go somewhere in the middle. The middle would be 50%. So what's half of 84? Half of 84, we want to say what's half of 84 would be 42. We want to say half of 42 goes here. What's half of 50? 25%. We're looking for what half of 42 is, which would be 21. Then we say, what's 42 plus 21 to figure out this last bit, or 75%, because 25 plus 50% gives us 75%. So we add those up, 42 plus 21 is 63, and that gives us our different percents for this problem, for 84. So we want to break down what those percents mean for each number. So if we do a different number, we do 45 in this chart. You could also do it in a chart. We think about if we say the number 45, well, what would 10% of 45 be? To figure out what 10% is, how'd you get from 100 to 10? You divided it by 10. So, if we divided it by 10, if we divide 45 by 10, we get 4.5. So then, I don't like to jump to 20 and 30. That's harder, so I'm going to go down to 50. What's half of 45? To get 50% from 100 to 50 is divided by 2. So I'm going to divide 45 by 2. And that gives me 22.5. Now, the other ones in between, I can use those numbers to fill them in. So to get to 20%, 10% plus 10% would give me 20%. So I can add 4.5 plus 4.5. That'll give me 9. So using our common sense knowledge, our mathematical knowledge, we can say, how do I get from 10 to 30? Well, I times that by 3. So 4.5 times 3 gave me 13.5. This is why do we go to numbers from 100 to numbers like 10%. If it's a whole number, it's easy to get from 100 to 10% and then move upward from that. So 4 times 10% would give me 40%. So 8.4 times 4 gives me 22. Nope, not 22.5. Gives me 18, sorry. Because 4.5 times 4 gives me 18. 4.5 times 5 would also have given me 22.5. Although in this case, it is easier to go just do one motion and divide 100 by 2 to get 50. Then we can take and combine ones we already have to get these numbers. So I have 50 and I have 10. So I can say 22.5 plus 40.5, and that will give me 27, which is 60%. Because 50% plus 10% gives you 60%. Same thing for 70. I can do 20% plus 50%, and that's going to give me 31.5. And 80 would be 13.5 plus 22.5, which is 36. I could also say stuff like, if I have 70%, I can add 10% to 70% and get that 80. Those will also work. For the last one, I can do a lot of things. I can add 40% plus 5% or 50%. I could also take 10% away from 100%, and I could also add 10% to 80%. You can do this a lot of ways, but the answer should always come out to 40.5, because this minus 4.5 is 40.5. So then we take a look. We want to set those up as fractions. When we set up a fraction, I always say part over whole. That's how all fractions are set up. In a percent, the denominator is always 100. So I'm going to say 100 for the denominator. And then I say what that percent is, what that percent number is over 100. So part over whole, we can use the trick to say the part is the is and the whole is the of. That gives us percent over 100, and part is, they'll use the word is in a sentence, and whole, they'll use the word of to tell us what is the part and what is the whole. Using that part, which is over whole, which is of, gives us percent over 100. We're going to solve some problems. So what is 2% of 65? So we're saying is 2%, and then we're saying of 35, right? So I'm going to do part over whole, and in that I'll say, what's my whole for a percent? My whole for a percent is always 100. My percent is 2. So I'll have 2%. Then I use the word of, which is 35, and of is a whole, so I'm going to put 35 here. Now I just want to find out what my part is. So to find that out, I look and I say, is there an easy relationship between 100 and 35? Not really. Is there an easy relationship between 100 and 2? There is. 100 divided by something can give me 2, because 100 is an even number. So I can say, what's 100 divided by 50 to give me that 2, right? So 35 divided by 50 will give me my answer. 35 divided by 50 gives me 0.7. So my answer is 0.7 is 2% of 35. Now, I could have gone to a different number. I could have gone to 10 or 5 and gone up to 35 and gotten to it the same way. It would have still given me the same answer. So, we can also say, we're going to do the next problem and read what percent of 50 is 18. So I can do that same problem using the same method. Percent of $50 is $18. So I'm looking for what percent of 50 is $18. So I'm going to set this up and use cross multiplication. So I'm still going to set up part over whole. So I'll say something is equal to something else, right? Where I keep 100 on the bottom. So if 50 is of and 18 is 18% or $18 is what percent of 50, right? So I'm looking for a percent. I could have done this in the ratio table the same way, but in this one we're going to cross multiply. So I'm going to say 18 times 100, and we're going to use the variable x here, and 50 times x. So when I do that, I say 18 times 100 is equal to 50 times x. 18 times 100 should give me 1800, which is equal to still 50x. To get x by itself, this is a one-step equation, and I'm going to divide 50x by 50 to get it by itself. And I'm left with x is equal to, what's 1800 divided by 50, which is 36. So that 36 actually represents the percent. So it's 36%. 18 is 36% of 50. Okay, we're going to find 130% of 63. We're going to do that by using that number line. We're going to break it up and say what happens to find 130% of 63. So we're going to start with this 100%. What's 100% of 63? Well, 63 is 100% of 63. So we're looking for 130%. So what I'm going to do is say, what's a number? What do I need to know? Well, I need to know that 100 plus 30, 100% plus 30% gives me 130%. So I need to figure out what that 30% is. But to figure out what that 30% is, I need to know 10%. Because that's a lot easier. We'll keep that 50%. So, I'd say to get from 63 to 50, or to get from 100 to 50, I had to divide it by 2. So I divide 63 by 2, and I get 31.5. Then I can divide that by 5 to get 10%. That just gives me some steps. So 66.3 is what I get for 10%. I could divide 63 by 10, and that would also give me 6.3. Then I go from 6.3, I'm looking for 30%. So how do I get from 10 to 30? That's times by 3. And then to get from 6.3 to the new to 30%, I'm also going to times it by 3. So 6.3 times 3 gives me 18.9. So I take that 18.9 and add that 18.9 to 63 to get what 100% plus 30% gives me 130%. So our answer for what 30% plus 100% or 130% is for 63 is 81.9. So our correct answer for that is 81.9. Joy tried to make 15 baskets and made 12. What percent of her attempts were successful? So we want to know what percent of her attempts were successful. Jo tried to make 15 of those baskets, so that means 15 is the whole, whereas she actually made 12. That makes it the part. So we are going to do a ratio table for this. We're going to compare part over whole. And we're going to start with our baskets. So we're comparing baskets to percents. Right? So in baskets, we have 15 total baskets, and she made 12 of them. So the part was 12, and the whole was 15. For our percent, we know the whole for a percent is always 100. So now we're trying to figure out how we got from 15 to 100. Is 15 to 100 an easy number to know? I don't know it off the top of my head, so I'd say probably not. If you do, that's great. However, I'm going to go from 15 to a number they have in common, 115 that is, I'm going to say they have number 5. They both are divisible by 5. So to get from 15 to 5, I did what? Divided by 3. So I can take 12 and divide it by 3. What's 12 divided by 3? Well, it's 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. So we have 4 over 5. Now I'm going to go from 5 to 100. How did I get from 5 to 100? Well, I multiplied by 20. So I'm going to say 4 times 20 is going to give me that answer. 4 times 20 is 80. So the correct answer for this, we should get 80. So is it just 80 or is it 80%? So 12 out of 15 is an 80%. That's a pretty good shot record. So we can say Joy made 80% of her baskets. On Friday, 75 teachers showed up at East High. This is 75% of the entire staff. How many teachers work at East? So I'm going to solve this with a ratio table because I like ratio tables. You are welcome to do cross multiplication or use the number line, but I'm going to use a ratio table. I'm going to start with my ratio table, and I'm still going to use part over whole. I'm going to label my two other things. I'm comparing percent to teachers, right? So this is percent. I'm going to put 100 because the whole for a percent is always 100. Then they give us a percent. They tell us it's 75%. Then I want to talk about the teachers who showed up. 75 teachers showed up. That means 75 is the part or the whole. Well, in this case, because it said we're looking for how many work at East, that's a total, that makes 75 the part, right? So I can notice really easily what? That I have the same number on top. That means what should I have on the bottom? If this is times 1, I should times by 1, and I'll get 100, right? It should be the same. So there are 100 teachers work at East. Now, you are going to do the next two problems. You can use any of the three methods. Just solve them and make sure you have the part and whole in the right place.